resistance to President Trump is rising. You see it in Congress, you see it in the courts, you see it in corporations, and you're even seeing it with a few Republicans. I'm Jim VandeHei, CEO of Axios.
I'm Mike Allen, co-founder of Axios. And Jim, one of the dynamics in every single one of those groups is they're starting to look at their own self-interest. Most of those groups have been focused on what's Trump going to think about me? What's Trump going to do to me?
Yep.
But spoiler, Trump's a lame duck. Trump is not going to be on the ballot again. Don't tell him. But corporations, Republicans are starting to realize that.
Little by little, right? Because it is like courage begets courage. And yes, Democrats have always spoken out against Trump, and that's not surprising. But what we are seeing is some corporations, you saw it in Minneapolis, where they finally are speaking out when they find things that he's doing to be abhorrent. You're definitely seeing it, obviously, in the media. You even seen some Republicans doing it. But you see it now with a few elected Republicans in office. And I don't want to overstate it. Like you and I talk about this all the time. Like it's still only a handful of Republicans. But when you have a narrow House and a narrow Senate, all it takes is a handful, and 2 becomes 4, 4 becomes 8, and you're starting to see it snowball.
And the White House realizes this, but by the White House, I'm not talking about Donald Trump.
Yes.
Like something that the people around the president are having a real hard time doing is getting him to focus on the fact that midterms are coming quickly and they want to start spending money, but Trump thinks about Trump, and Trump is having the time of his life. Trump is traveling around the world, renaming things after himself, making deals, and he doesn't feel the political pressure that the people beside him and under him are feeling more acutely by the day.
That might be the most important point in this video, and it's really hard to explain to people that even when his popularity goes down, even when he has losses, he does not give a shit. He does not care. It's almost like he's impenetrable in terms of how he sees himself. And part of that is he doesn't really care if he passes laws. He doesn't really care if he loses in court, as long as he wins a couple of cases in court and as long as he has executive power. And it's the damnedest thing, because you and I have talked to countless Republicans who go in there and they're like, sir, please, please, please stop doing these enforcements in Minneapolis. Stop talking about Venezuela. Stop talking about Greenland. It is killing me in my district. And his response is,
I'm the president. I'm Trump. I can. And so I will. And he's still living his best life, enjoying the fact that he has dominion, not just over the country, but over the world. And so telling him, oh, like, what about this interest? Or what about this senator? Or what about this company? Like, is not the way to get his attention.
let's walk through the categories of resistance for people who are skeptical. Number one, we wouldn't be talking about the Epstein files if it weren't for Democrats and a number of Republicans who are deeply, deeply offended by what they're seeing. They get to go behind closed doors now. They get to look at the redacted version. It's turning their stomachs.
It's a little bit like living in what it must have been like to live in Watergate, that every day there's something new, something that surprises you. How did this happen? How are these smart people now claiming to be so dumb?
Anybody who's skeptical about well, maybe they didn't know. He was running a Ponzi scheme of young women, recruiting other young women that was so well known in Palm Beach. Everybody knew about it.
Yeah, in Congress, they're starting to do their own calculations. And what you and I have been surprised over the last year about the incredible deference that these members of Congress have paid to Trump on issue after issue. But now they're starting to find their own footing. Oh, what's going to be like post-Trump? What's it going to be like when Trump is in his final 2 years and attention is turning to what's next?
Very few things unite voters. People like Epstein raping girls under the age of 18 tends to be a 100% topic. Most people are abhorred by it and don't want to see it. The second category of where you're seeing the resistance, and I think this is really important, is in the courts, right? At the Supreme Court level, let's be clear, the president's winning more than he's losing. But if you look at these grand juries, if you look at non-Supreme Court courts, and you look at these cases, particularly around retribution, the president's getting his clock cleaned. It is not normal for grand juries to unanimously reject a prosecution.
Exhibit A of this is a grand jury refusing the administration's effort to indict 6 Democratic lawmakers. Like peers saying, wait a second, no, like you didn't prove your case. I'm not going to automatically rubber stamp that. But what's amazing about it is how unusual it is that the hard part is usually in court. The indictment for the prosecution is usually easy. You don't go in front of a grand jury unless you know that you're going to get it because you're not having other witnesses, you're not having other evidence. It's just you. And think about an argument, a relationship. If you can't make the case for yourself, you're never going to win.
Yes, and the thing about these cases, whether it's a grand jury or it's a court, is that like, let's be honest about like human nature. Like we are all persuadable. So the more that you see other people standing up, whether your fellow judges or whether your fellow members of a grand jury, the more likely it is that other people are. Like for the first time, I'd say in the last couple of months, people feel like it's safe to stand up to Trump. And that's a dangerous place politically to be because when you're sitting at 35% popularity, there's a kind of a pent up desire to stand up.
It may be dangerous for them too. Like we have to do a little reality
Yeah.
check here that Trump still has incredible levers
Yes.
and he's still Trump and he's still the retribution president. And so that's why these conversations that companies are having, that institutions are having, that lawmakers are having, they're so fraught because Trump is weaker, but he's not weak.
And then the third area where you're seeing this play out, and this is where it goes to your point about like the pressure of survival instincts of being in Congress, is around tariffs. Like, almost every member of Congress that we talk to off the record is like, this is
Mhm.
insane. Why are we doing this weird kind of let's tariff them kind of system? Why are we going after allies like Canada, people who've been our trading partners forever? This is nonsensical. It doesn't make economic logic, doesn't make political logic. And yet most of the members of Congress just sit there and act like they're supportive of it. You have seen Republicans on the Canada, for instance, saying that, no, we're not going to slap tariffs on Canada, or you've got to give us exemptions on steel and aluminum, or you've got to figure out a way to give us enough exemptions to bring down prices. And that goes down to survival. If you just go back to the district, you can get away with a lot. You can't get away with a bad economy and high prices.
No, that's right. And if you're looking for the golden age that President Trump promised,
Yeah.
that the members and senators were counting on the golden age, and people aren't feeling it. It may be a golden age if you own a lot of stock, right? Or
Yeah.
if you own a lot of real estate in Palm Beach. But for most people, it is not. And uh, last week, there were a couple of studies, every couple of days, a new study, like showing how much tariffs are hurting small businesses,
Yeah.
are hurting American businesses, are being paid for by consumers. And there's another element of it that you and I have been chatting about is it's part of the deterioration of America's image around the world.
You start to hear this in talking to industry groups. I was talking to somebody about who deals with investors coming in from Canada and Europe, and they're like, we don't want to put a dollar in the United States right now, and we're obviously the best place to invest in. So they're in some ways looking for ways to take action against their own best financial self-interest. And members of Congress feel this. And by the way, this could get a lot worse for Trump. It could get better, like if the economy improves and prices go down and joblessness stays low, it might be okay for Trump. I don't know that his numbers rise or that Republicans suddenly have a better chance to take back the House. But if for Trump, politically speaking, God forbid, if prices keep going up and joblessness goes up and people get even more uncertain, that's when 2 becomes 4 becomes 8 becomes 80. Then you have a huge structural problem. The fourth area, maybe the most important area, is what we saw happen in Minneapolis, where the president, the White House, escalated things, had all these ICE agents using very aggressive tactics, ultimately killing citizens of the United States. The president didn't want to back down, but the pressure was so intense. It was intense from corporations. It was intense from members of Congress, and he buckled.
Mr. President, speaking of Minneapolis, what did you learn?
I learned that maybe we can use a little bit of a softer touch.
it shows you can use public pressure, that there are still mechanisms in the democracy where if people find behavior to be abhorrent or counter to the Constitution, that people together can make a big difference.
And with Trump, that lever is always going to be images. And that's what we saw from ICE and from Minneapolis. And number of people reported from behind the scenes, Trump was saying that he didn't like the pictures. He didn't like seeing those pictures. And that's what broke through. Similarly, one of the podcasters who were they called them right-coded, but they really weren't. They were more centrist and they liked Trump. Like they're starting to be anti-Trump, and ICE is a big part of that. The ever since the border was locked down, the deportation efforts is part of what's really turned podcasters against Trump. And I was asking the Trump people about this, and they're very pragmatic. They say these people were never MAGA. It's just like Trump is good box office. And we said yes to their invitations, and Vice President Harris said no. And so they had Trump on. But it's a very visible example of the sea change of rising resistance, ebbing deference to Trump.
And put this in a time capsule. If you really want to understand how much better of a politician Trump is, even if you hate him, than J.D. Vance. J.D. Vance's instincts were to double down, to go after anybody who was complaining about ICE's tactics. The president looked at that same image and didn't say a word. And when he did say a word, it was to reverse course. Trump remains an unbelievably formidable force within the Republican Party. And even as the resistance rises, I think Republicans will stick with him. And this is really important, is that Trump, unlike previous presidents, isn't looking to sign bills into law. He's looking to exert executive power, and he's looking to use rhetoric or action like warfare that sits outside of congressional oversight, at least as of right now. And so even as the resistance rises, his resistance to the resistance will rise.
He will insist on being central to the country, central to the coverage, central to the world.